Hi there. July 25th is the birthday of Peninsula Players Theater, and we thought in this interview we would celebrate that by talking a little bit about how the heck someone decided to start a theater in Door County, Wisconsin in 1935. And here with me today is Audra Baakari Boyle, our business manager.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Audie. And besides being business manager, you are also a kind of historian for the players.
Historian, archivist, publicist, little combination of all of those. I've had a lot of fun giving some lectures to local historical societies on the history of Peninsula Players. So
Because you've done a lot of research, you uncovered a bunch of stuff.
I have, and I've actually enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite pastimes is to kind of delve into the archives and see what I can find out about past players and its history.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was many people know about the history of Peninsula Players, starting with its location by the bay, where it is now. But that started there in 1937. In 1935, actually, the theater started elsewhere.
It did, but it started still in Fish Creek, and it was located and began behind the Bonnie Brook Motel, which was located across from the entrance of the Peninsula State Park.
But before we get there, the beginnings of Peninsula Players started, of all places, it seems, in Rogers City, Michigan.
Michigan, along another lake shore frontage. And that is where the Fisher family grew up. And the Fisher family
are?
The Fishers are Papa, who is Charles Richard, Mama Lydia, and their three children, Margot, Richard, and Caroline.
And Caroline and Richard were the founders of the theater.
Were the founders of the theater. Caroline and Richard were both very interested and fascinated in the performing arts, and Caroline always wanted to have a theater of her own. And the children spent their time in the garage, the family garage, entertaining the neighbors, putting on plays.
In Rogers City.
In Rogers City, yes.
Now, I think they had some encouragement.
They did. Their mother, Lydia, was a graduate of the Pratt School of Design in New York City, and she majored in costume design. So as a mother myself, encouraging the creativity of my own child, I can envision her helping them put little sets together and costume pieces and just helping them entertain the neighborhood kids.
So it seems like from the very get-go, Caroline wanted to have a theater company of her own. She always dreamed about that.
She always dreamed about it. She said in interviews, in articles that I have read, that that was her and Richard's childhood dream, was to start a theater company in the country somewhere where they could experiment to their delight and do shows. And that is what she wanted. And that was her biggest dream, to have a theater company.
It seems like their parents were aided them in this, because they moved from Rogers City
to Chicago eventually, and then eventually found their way to Door County for the summers. And Papa Fisher was an engineer, an electrical engineer, so he kind of could help in that aspect of technical things. And Mama was a costumer, and she helped with that. Richard was an aspiring playwright, and he wrote several of the shows that the Players did, and Caroline was into performing and managing the company.
And they went to school for theater in Chicago.
They did, at Northwestern, and met several people throughout the professional people in Chicago.
And they got to know people at the Goodman School of Drama.
Goodman School of Drama, and a variety of places, and several in other states as well.
So they somehow got connected to Door County, and they made a connection up there.
They did. At eventually, it's the Depression. So thinking about the time period, people are trying to find things to do and to work, and especially in the summer. So Mama and Papa, being parents, asked a friend of theirs, Hedwig, Inger Welker, who owned the Bonnybrook, if the kids could perform some shows behind there for the summer. And she said, sure, I'm a supporter of the arts. And that's where it all started, in this garden area. And it's fascinating. It just fascinates me.
So again, remind us of where the Bonnybrook Motel was.
The Bonnybrook was located across from the Peninsula State Park, right along Highway 42. And Hedwig was an avid gardener. So behind the motel was this beautiful landscaped area that was a natural amphitheater. And she had built up the gardens and put down flagstone paths and beautiful stone fences. And it was just a gorgeous location. And Richard was enamored with that, as I think were the patrons who attended that summer.
And Caroline was enamored because it was a natural amphitheater.
It was a natural amphitheater, yes.
And of course now the motel is no longer there, but there is the Fish Creek Town Park.
There is the park, and there is a plaque that commemorates the birthplace of Peninsula Players Theater there as well. So it's nice. It's nice to be remembered and honored in that way.
So they talked to Helga. She says, sure, do some theater in the back. And in 1935, they opened.
And they had planned a season of 12 different shows, but on July 25th, 1935, they began with No Cowards, Hay Fever, a comedy.
And Audie, you found an article from the Capital Times in Madison.
I did, from 1935, written by Ina Barnes, Mrs. Ina Barnes. She and a gal pal were vacationing or at their summer home, and they were there. And opening night.
Yes, and this is what she wrote that Audie found. The simplicity of the theater in the garden makes a definite appeal from the moment one enters the little white gate to purchase a ticket from the personable young man seated before a rustic table, making change by the light of a brace of tall candles in a quaint brass candelabrum. The feeling of entering a sort of fairyland persists as you thread your way over the white flagstones marking the path through the garden down to the natural amphitheater, where chairs are placed before an outdoor stage whose proscenium arch is flanked on either side by wings of natural shrubbery, behind which a garden path leads to the dressing rooms in Bonnybrook Cottage. A floodlight from the cottage, which forms one side of the amphitheater, discloses an audience all decked out for the occasion in regulation theater attire, including sparkling jewels, twinkling eardrops, velvet evening wraps, white flannels, and a generous sprinkling of the nautical uniforms of the men who man the many boats which abound in the waters of Green Bay and Lake Michigan. When the footlight signals the floodlight to go out and the stars overhead appear, a satisfied hush indicates that the audience is ready and willing to be entertained. And she finishes with, judging from the interest of Thursday night's audience, one might safely predict this summer season of drama is but the beginning of many more. And that was somewhat prophetic.
It was very prophetic. And I have to tell you, my heart just went little pitter patters when I first read it. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God, I got a little moved there in the middle too, because this is still what the theater is by the day.
It is. Yeah, exactly. So I'm sitting here reading it going, oh my gosh, we're still enchanted by this garden. And knowing Richard was had an avid fascination with gardens and landscaping, the charm and beauty of that place, and it still exists. This is what we love about Peninsula Players, is coming into that fairyland and just embracing and being enchanted and just falling in love with the natural beauty. And then,
so it's so wonderful to hear that the history of the place, that it was created from the get-go with those ideas. And also the other part was that Caroline wanted to have a high caliber company of people there.
Correct. So I know we had talked about them meeting their classmates and other professionals. So members of that first company that were there were not just fresh out of school students. There were seasoned professionals who had toured the country in shows or performed in New York City, or a very well seasoned comedic actress who was also a voice and diction instructor in Chicago. So they really did attract artisans of high caliber who were very fascinated in wanting to provide and do art and theater. And Caroline wanting to also run a company. She didn't want to just perform. She wanted to be a manager. She wanted to help run the company. One of the company members that was there in 1935 was Madeline Fales, and she had an interesting connection to two other actor managers of a female persuasion. So one was Clara Tree Major and her daughter Dorothy Major. Clara was the first British actress to tour America from coast to coast. And she started her own children's theater company. And then her daughter Dorothy started her own children's theater company that toured. And they produced, wrote, and performed these children's shows like Rip Van Winkle and Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farms. And Madeline toured with them. Madeline also performed with, and help me with the name, Eva.
Eva Le Gallienne.
Because I can never get that name pronounced correctly. But she worked with her repertory company. And Eva's considered the pioneer of forming American repertory theater, of the entire system of getting sponsors to help produce her shows. So she ran the Civic Theater in New York from like 1926, I believe, to 1936, and was wanting to bring art to the people. And I really think Caroline looked at those people around her and knew that this could be done. These are my mentors. These are my, it can happen. You just have to have enough gumption. And from what people tell me about her, she really did. She went up and down Cottage Row asking to borrow costumes and furniture pieces.
So right from the get-go, Carolyn and Richard surrounded themselves with what they felt was the best in talent and beauty.
And beauty, exactly.
And also they, right from the get-go, the season was extremely varied.
It was. I found this ad in one of the local papers at the time. So in 1935, before they even opened, they were selling season subscriptions for $5 for a subscription. And they had a list of 12 different shows in their repertoire that they were looking at, but they only performed that season 5 out of those. And so they opened with Hay Fever, and then they went to Ibsen and Hedda Gabler, a very, very good drama. And then they did a mystery called The Second Man. I believe that one was. No, A Criminal at Large. That was it. The Second Man is another season. And then they also had performed another farce called The Mad Hopes. And so a little bit of drama, a little bit of comedy. And they also wrote their own shows. So Richard wanted to be a playwright, and he wrote a variety show. And that's what they closed their season with, was little song and dance, little monologue pieces, and little sketches that Richard put together.
And actually, I think that's been a wonderful part of its history, that the seasons have always been a variety of stuff. And actually that first season for me as artistic director has always been an inspiration, because that kind of variety is something that I aim for in every summer, and hope that will continue for perpetuity.
Great.
So they had, the first season went well, I think, in terms of artistic success.
They did, and I have to share this little bit too. So they opened Hay Fever, and they felt it went over so well that when they went to do Ibsen's Hedda Gabler, they added additional seats and discounted them to 50 cents so that they could fit more people in the amphitheater behind the body of Brooks.
So they finished the 1935 season, and I think I read that it was, as I said, an artistic success, but not necessarily a financial success.
Right.
So the next year,
Caroline then spent the next year raising money, working. So she found jobs in Chicago, and she would take breaks from her lunch, whether she was working at a clerk someplace or wherever, and she'd take extended lunch breaks so she could be a model at a department store and earn extra money to pay the bills from the 1935 season and save money for the next season as well. And she was very successful at being a model. She was one of the one of Chicago's top photography models for different photographers for their projects. And I've found an article where she was, all I saw was the back of her head, but it was like a hairstyle coif, you know, the latest hair trend she was pictured in. So
this happened a little bit later in December of 1937, but I want to mention it right now because there was an article called "In Films to Pay Mortgage,"
yes.
and from Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And it shows there's a photo of Caroline signing a contract, and it says, "After much persuasion, Carolyn Fisher finally accepted a movie contract, but she's going to quit as soon as she earns enough to pay off the mortgage on her summer theater at Fish Creek, Wisconsin." She quotes, "I understand Wesley Ruggles has selected a role for me," the 22-year-old actress born in Rogers City, Michigan said today. "It is supposed to be a heavy part, a sort of villainous, but that's all right with me so long as I get the money. The only excuse for my presence in Hollywood is to get myself and the Peninsula Players out of the red. Ever since I was a child, I dreamed of having my own theater. Maybe Hollywood can't understand my ambition, but I do." Mm-hmm. And so she was clearly driven. And
she really was. And another article within there too, that I found in Sioux City, South Dakota was, "My first and only love will be the Peninsula Players in Fish Creek."
So she spent 1936 making money, and then in 1937...
And then in 1937, the Wildwood Camp for Boys came for sale, and the family invested $12,000 into turning it into starting the beautiful dream that we are today.
And so that is a whole nother leg of the journey from there forth, when they built the first stage house, which was a sort of a barn with the side open, which is that photo
right behind there. That's right there from 1937's production of The Importance of Being Earnest.
Yes. And while we don't have time to go through the whole rest of the 85 years of history, I thought it was really, really cool to talk about the very, very beginnings of the theater and where it started and how it began with a really deep love for theater and for making the best product possible in the most beautiful setting possible. And I think, Audie, you and I and all of us at the theater have been inspired by the Fishers
forever.
Yeah.
Yes, forever.
Well, Audie, thank you so much for being here today and helping to celebrate our Peninsula Players Theater 85th birthday.
Yes.
On July
Happy
20th.
Birthday.
Happy birthday. And hopefully we will talk to you soon.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.